welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Let me know how everything sounds this morning. Hey, we already got a virtual wave. Look at that. Starting off the jump with a virtual wave. Thank you for joining us. We have a lot to get to, a few texts and comments from the other day. So we appreciate everybody. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. Oh, you see in the background. What do you think? We're starting to decorate for the telethon, which is coming up on Friday. That's to benefit the Salvation Army of Corning. So I hope that you'll tune in. It's a special holiday edition of Frankly Speaking because it is 2 hours. It starts at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to have music. We're going to have fun. We're going to have special guests. And again, it's a fundraiser to benefit the Salvation Army of Corning, which the name, it's not misleading. It just it sounds like it's just Corning, but it's Steuben County. So the Salvation Army of Corning. And I'm really looking forward to it. The planning is in full effect. Okay, so I'm going to do you a favor here. And you can say you heard it on Frankly Speaking if you get any pushback. According to studyfinds.org, not only, well, no, let me reword that. I'm going to put the headline up. Declining invitations to holiday parties is actually good for you. Well, it turns out after reading this, not only is it good for you, apparently the people didn't want you there anyway. Saying no to a holiday party you simply have no interest in could be the best thing for your mental health. A new study finds politely declining, keyword, politely declining unwanted invitations during the holiday season has a bigger positive impact than dragging yourself to countless gatherings you may not want to attend in the first place. More than 3/4 of people in the survey confessed that they accept invitations to gatherings they don't want to attend out of fear that, they'll offend someone or maybe be judged for not attending. However, researchers found that loved ones not only don't care about rejected invitations as much as people think they do, but saying no more often can also be beneficial in avoiding that holiday burnout. So it turns out your loved ones, according to this, don't really care if you say no. But anyway, you can say you heard it here on Frankly Speaking when you decline the invitation. But one invitation I hope that you don't decline is the holiday party here on Friday on Frankly Speaking, starting at 6 a.m. with the Salvation Army. Okay, let's go to a text message we received after the program yesterday. I consider myself to be mentally fit until I hear comments that Chris Christie has made, especially when sounding off at Vivek's mean-spirited comments towards Nikki Haley. There's a smiley face there, but smiley faces don't show up on the text here. Please help me understand how someone who does nothing but bash our former president in every nasty possible way, because I'm starting to question that mental acuity. In full disclosure, I'm not a fan of Nikki Haley. And although I think she's bright, I also believe she's a little too crafty. And beware of the company she keeps. This next line is a great segue into what I'm going to bring up next. And SNL, their latest clips I've seen are also making me question myself. Not right. I don't know if you saw that. It was kind of a hot topic yesterday. We ran out of time talking about. I think it's Dean Obadala, but I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that. I've seen that. There used to be somebody that would always write about the importance and the historical nature of Saturday Night Live. It would be an article every either Sunday or Monday. And I found it kind of corny and not really in any way, shape, or form journalism. So I've somewhat through the years avoided talking about Saturday Night Live because it doesn't seem relevant any longer. And I point to, this isn't the first time I noticed it, but they started to feel that they were kingmakers. And you saw it if you ever read any book about Saturday Night Live and the history of Saturday Night Live. They started getting kind of, to say the term, too big for their britches. They just thought that they could decide who would be president, who would be certain, governor, senator, whatever. And I thought, boy, I don't think they have the impact they think they do. Well, Dean Obadala would write these lengthy, glowing pieces. But what I guess when I noticed it the most was right after Hillary lost and Donald Trump won. And they had the woman who played Hillary Clinton on the program sing that classic song, Hallelujah. There was no comedy sketch to it. And Hallelujah would make it sound like, if you're not familiar with the song, that they were happy that Hillary lost. No, that's not the case. It's a sad song. So, and I thought, not only is this not a comedy sketch, you're basically showing, and they had a whole lengthy introduction before about how heartbroken they were. They're showing how it's not about speaking truth to power, as they've always professed. It was just political. It was actually sad and kind of pathetic in a way that they were this heartbroken over the election. And I thought, well, they're no longer relevant. They're pushing a political narrative. So when we come back from break, I'm going to tell you just quickly, because I don't want to focus too much on Saturday Night Live, but there's a piece by Kristen Fleming that talks about how tone deaf Saturday Night Live is, and I would add just really full of themselves and believing their importance. But that's coming up after the break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live, and I think pretty smoothly from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. You just saw that beautiful view of the street. So we're talking about Saturday Night Live, and I also want to mention to that person's comment, I agree. I like Nikki Haley. I've mentioned that in the program before, but I am also concerned by the company that she keeps. I'm also concerned by who seems to be throwing their support behind her. You've heard me say it numerous times, so I didn't mean to glance over your point. So again, thank you. You can always reach out and comment on the topics we're discussing. So again, Saturday Night Live, in my opinion, tone deaf, as Kristen Fleming says, also really full of themselves. It was really cringe-worthy if you watched the opener the other day. Instead of, and I full disclosure, I don't watch Saturday Night Live. Every once in a while I'll see a clip, but I started hearing so much rumbling about this. I watched some of it, and I couldn't really even get through it because it wasn't funny. And instead of focusing their ire on the college presidents who couldn't stand up against anti-Semitism, they went after Elise Stefanik. And the only reason you can think that would be the case is because Elise Stefanik was so effective and did such an amazing job at that hearing. The past weekend, the cold open sketch, as they're called, of Saturday Night Live, tackled the sensational congressional hearings of December the 5th, when New York Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik grilled the presidents of MIT, Harvard, and UPenn, who all refused to condemn students calling for the genocide of Jews on their campuses. Think about that. Think about what we're dealing with in academia. A worthy topic, but a disastrous, embarrassing rendering. Saturday Night Live came out swinging, but they came out swinging on the side of anti-Semitism. SNL writers turned their poison pens on Stefanik, of all people, in this scenario, who actually trounced the three in a public beating like we haven't seen since Ivan Drago killed Apollo Creed on screen back in '85. That's a good reference from Kristen Fleming. Chloe, I hope I get this name right. Again, I don't watch Saturday Night Live, so please bear with me. Chloe Trost played Stefanik as a vain, shrieking attention person. I'm not going to use the word she put here. Bent on scoring political points, while the academics, painted as too smart for the little people, outfoxed her with their rhetorical prowess and stonewalling. As Trost said, playing Stefanik, I'm going to start screaming questions at these women like I'm Billy Eichner. So if you don't get the message there, what they're saying is Republicans are dumb, y'all. That's according to Fleming. Worst of all, it was comically unfunny, doling out only secondhand embarrassment for those brave enough to sit through the entire thing. And again, full disclosure, I could not. Not one chuckle would be had. The sketch limping along like a sick old dog that needs to be put down. And maybe the same can be said for Saturday Night Live, a once beloved cultural institution. Its relevance has been diluted by edgier comedians optimizing the internet and making comedy for the masses, not just five progressives in a Brooklyn bubble. And I think that is a very good point. Saturday Night Live once speaking truth to power, but if you really think about it, it was always just going against the Republican as a rule. But people have utilized the internet and other outlets to actually have edgier, funnier comedy. And again, I even made it a note here because Lorne Michaels said, our job is whoever is in power, we're opposed. that just does not bear out when you watch the program. And I go back, if you ever want to watch it, the character playing Hillary Clinton singing Hallelujah on the piano was supposed to be a sketch after Hillary lost. And now Hallelujah isn't a happy song. That's a depressing song. Trying to make people sad that Hillary had lost. Thanks to YouTube, social media, podcasts, and streaming services, Saturday Night Live is no longer the kingmaker it once was. And they really do believe they're kingmaker. If you've ever read any behind-the-scenes books where they interview past cast members, they really, really were full of themselves. So anyway, one doesn't need big network budgets to make incredible comedy and biting social commentary. They just need a YouTube channel and guts, which Saturday Night Live seems to be lacking these days. So that's enough on Saturday Night Live. We're going to talk about those college presidents, some of the information that's been coming out there, a little bit here about the Hanukkah celebration yesterday with President Biden. Some international stories as well, but we've got to take our second break. So stay with us. We will be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I'm your host, Frank Aiken, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street, Corning. As you see, we're getting in the holiday spirit for our telethon. You just saw the ad for it coming up on Friday, starting at 6 a.m. Don't miss it. Get in the holiday spirit. A lot of great music, special guests. Speaking of the Salvation Army of Corning, because that's who it benefits, I know this has been, I can't believe it. I was talking with the assemblyman yesterday. It's been 15 years they've been doing this, and I know it's a fun, I don't know if you want to call it a competition, but Democrats, the Corning Democrats and the Corning Republicans face each other at the kettle to see who can raise more for an amazing cause, which is the Salvation Army of Corning. So on Wednesday, you can come to Centerway on Market Street and make your donation to the Democrats if you want to support the Democrats in the competition. If you want to support the Republican, they are on Thursday, same place, right here on Market Street, Centerway Square. So I know a lot of people like to make their donations on that day to support their party. And of course, it's all good fun. They don't ever release the numbers. I do think they sometimes hint at who won, but I'm not positive. I can't remember what the rules are on that. But they're working together. It's to show unity for an amazing cause. And then if you miss either of those opportunities, of course, or you want to add on, stop by on Friday during the telethon. We're going to have a kettle right out in front of our studio. We can wave. You can drop off the money there. We'll also have a QR code on the screen that you can scan to go to the website, or you can text a phone number and make your donation there. So you're going to have a lot of opportunities to help out an amazing organization. All right, let's get back to it. Biden did pledge his support to Israel at the Hanukkah event, coming from CNN here. He touted his unshakable support for the safety of the Jewish people and the security of Israel and its right to exist. But, as is normally the case, there's a disclaimer that's offered. He gave a stark warning about the issue of public opinion. This is what he said. We'll continue to provide military assistance to Israel until they get rid of Hamas. That's good. We're starting out good. But we have to be careful. They have to be careful. The whole world's public opinion can shift overnight. We can't let that happen. And that's the warning that we've seen time and time again, where it's, be careful, be extra careful about casualties. Of course, Israel has been. Hamas is the one using civilians as shields. Israel has done a remarkable job throughout history to make sure that there are not civilian casualties, or as few as possible with the scenario Hamas has put them in. He continued, I also recognize you're hurting from the silence and the fear and for your safety because of a surge in anti-Semitism in the United States of America and around the world. It's sickening. We see it across our communities and schools and colleges and social media. they surface painful scars from millennia of hate to genocide of the Jewish people. Now, there was some criticism of the event because the White House has been accused of snubbing the hostage families at this Hanukkah event. According to, this is coming from the New York Post, but it was actually a CNN journalist, MJ Lee, who mentioned it, saying, quote, several family members of the American citizen hostages missing in Gaza had asked the White House to attend its Hanukkah reception tonight, but did not receive invitations, one of them tells me. Now, White House event invitations and perceived snubs routinely draw attention. It's unclear who on the West Wing staff would have been responsible for the decision. Now, we have taken another short break, but no, I got a second. I'm going to run a little late, so bear with me. But this ties in what I was just talking about with Hamas. This coming from the New York Post. Hamas's threat to kill hostages is only one more reason why Israel must destroy Hamas, must wipe it off the face of the earth. Hamas's threat to kill its remaining hostages is positively terrifying, but also a sign the gang of war criminals is on the ropes. That's a good point. Facing destruction on the battlefield, the terrorists are looking to psychological warfare for salvation. Hamas demands that Israel free all Palestinian criminals in its custody and allow more humanitarian aid for Gaza, humanitarian aid that they will ultimately steal. By threatening to kill them, the hostages, the terrorists aim to divide Israel and ratchet up pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to give in and maybe even stand down. That's why I get concerned when you see the president or other, not just president, people around him saying, well, they've got to be extra careful. And you keep hearing that talking point because that plays into Hamas's hands, hoping to put that pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. But I'll continue. It's an act of desperation. Again, this is coming from the New York Post editorial board. A senior IDF officer says Israel's military has seen, quote, signs of Hamas breaking. Many terrorists have surrendered or been captured. The IDF estimates it has eliminated 7,000. And the hostages remain a valuable resource. That's why the terrorists seized them in the first place. We should know, utter violation of the Geneva Convention. Israel might accept another pause if Hamas's bargain in something resembling good faith for more releases. But Hamas may also fear that they'll say, particularly the women, if freed, they don't want these women to be able to talk about what happened to them during their time in custody. That's what the State Department's Matthew Miller warned last week. Israel's goal remains the same. Free every hostage it can and destroy Hamas completely. And the terrorists' latest threat mainly shows why their destruction is a must, that it is imperative. I thought that was a really, really good piece from the New York Post editorial board. We've got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, live and very smoothly this morning. We received a comment. Again, you can always reach out to us. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. Does anyone think, even for a second, that if Trump is in office, that he wouldn't make sure that the families, meaning the family of hostages, were represented at such an event, meaning the Hanukkah celebration at the White House? More evidence of who is actually in charge, definitely not Biden. Thank you for reaching out. Keep those comments coming in during the broadcast. Okay, so now you've probably heard that the Harvard University president, who's under fire for that hearing, that congressional hearing, Claudine Gay, that she copied entire paragraphs from others' academics' works and claimed them as her own, saying, quote, the Free Beacon saying, quote, this is definitely plagiarism, in 4 papers published between 1993 and 2017, including her doctoral dissertation. Gay, a political scientist, paraphrased or quoted nearly 20 authors, including 2 of her colleagues in Harvard University's Department of Government, without proper attribution, according to a analysis. Other examples of possible plagiarism, all from Gay's dissertation, were publicized Sunday by the Manhattan Institute's Christopher Rufo and Karlstadt's Chris Brunette. Now, she has defended herself, but because of this and that hearing, the National Association of Scholars has called for the removal of that Harvard president, Claudine Gay, in an open letter. They said the National Association of Scholars calls on the Harvard Corporation to remove Claudine Gay from Harvard's college presidency. President Gay is at the center of the controversy that followed her December 5th testimony to the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, in which she found herself unable to give a clear answer to questions about what Harvard could or would do in response to calls for genocide against Jews. Her answers on that occasion were far from satisfactory, but they are not the only reason why she should be removed from the presidency. Her performance on December 5th should be, to borrow a word she used repeatedly on that occasion, put into context. The letter then cited her shoddy professional work and her record of plagiarism. Now, Wesleyan president Michael Roth was on CBS Mornings yesterday, and he said Harvard and the MIT presidents should not be fired. He said because they would then be subject to these outside forces. The Republican congresswoman on the one hand, but also these big donors who are trying to throw their weight around. And I think that's not good for the long-range health of these schools. Well, a couple things there. So you don't want a scenario where these presidents are being held accountable, is what you're telling me by that statement. That the money should always be coming in from donors. Never mind what you've turned these supposed bastions of education into. That you should have, and I mean, that's a very college mentality. You know, professors, presidents, they're surrounded by yes men, meaning the students, who will never criticize them or tell them they're wrong, of course, or they can fail. So they're living in a bubble, and now they're saying they should not have any, and tenure, of course, plays into that too, where you're safe. So now he's saying the presidents should not have any accountability either. So when you cannot denounce the calls for genocide against Jews, it's the big donors that are the problem. It's at least Stefanik that's the problem, not what the presidents are saying, that the presidents would actually would be held accountable. That's the wrong part in all this. He also, though, went on to say this, and I think this is interesting. I do think we suffer from a lack of intellectual diversity in higher education. And I have for years. I've called for an affirmative action program for conservatives on college campuses. I mean, it's not as if conservatives aren't on college campuses. It's just that they're ostracized. They're social pariahs, unfortunately, not just from their fellow students, not getting invited to parties, not going to social events because they're the conservative, but also from their professors who will fail them, who will also criticize them and ostracize them. But I'll continue. And I talk with my faculty at Wesleyan about this all the time. Most of them disagree with me. They think they're fully capable of teaching a religious text, even if they are not a member of that religious group. Point taken. Nonetheless, I think we should be very suspicious when people at a university or anywhere else hire folks who look a lot like them. That's a mark of bias, or at least potentially so. And my faculty is very open to having the conversation. I haven't persuaded them all, but my students are totally open to studying religious texts, radical texts, and conservative texts. 650 plus Harvard faculty set out a letter of support for University President Claudine Gay, even with this plagiarism charge. But anyway, again, it's the bubble of being in academia where they don't feel that they should be held accountable. They look at the students as cash cows. This radicalism, this hatred just brews and brews and brews, and they don't dare say anything. They need that money coming in. So they coddle these students and teach them, just garbage, this rot this anti-Semitic that came from somewhere. And the problem is on these college campuses, they have to keep looking. We talked about it the other day. They have to keep looking, these students, because right now, the coolest thing you can be is the most aggrieved or the most offended, the most angry. So they have to look for more radical causes to be the coolest kid in the friend group. So that continues to grow. That's why we saw, maybe a month ago, if that, where some students and some TikTok social media stars suggested that you should read that letter to America from Osama bin Laden, that they agreed with what was being said in that piece, because let's face it, that's the most shocking, and you can't look more aggrieved and more offended and more of a social justice warrior, for lack of a better word, than to go out and say something that despicable. But again, that's the cool thing in today's culture, because that's what, going back to, it's been taught at college campuses. But 650 Harvard faculty members signed a letter urging leadership not to fire Claudine Gay after her testimony at the congressional hearing. The critical work of defending a culture of free inquiry in our diverse community cannot proceed if we let it be shaped by outside forces or dictated by outside forces. Again, what that is saying is they should not be held accountable. Would you be held accountable in your job if you, in some way, shape, or form, defended people calling for the genocide of Jews? How long do you think you would last? But see, what they don't like is that these donors, who they just thought would always be pouring millions and sometimes billions of dollars into their schools, when that starts to dry up a little bit, they don't know how to handle it. So they get mad at the donors. We should not be held accountable. We should not be held accountable by Washington, by Elise Stefanik, or anyone that sees what is happening on college campuses as wrong, as despicable. And as Connor Murnane and Angel Adurdo from the New York Post said, Harvard's Claudine Gay use of free speech as a defense, but has a history of squelching it during last week's House Education Committee hearing on campus anti-Semitism. College presidents like Harvard's Claudine Gay used free speech grounds to defend anti-Israel protests on campus, and we actually saw that in the media as well. I mentioned it on the program quickly yesterday, where they're starting to say implications for free speech, but I'll continue. The problem is, Gay's defense rings hollow when stacked against the university's reputation. When it comes to free speech, Harvard is abysmal. It finished dead last in the 2024 college free speech rankings, and that was from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. FIRE's results, or that's what it's called, come from a survey of 55,000 students at 248 schools. They assess openness, tolerance, self-expression, administrative support for free speech, and campus speech policies. When we come back, I'm going to tell you where Harvard ranked in that, because I'm running just a little late. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you for joining us on Frankly Speaking as we broadcast from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. I'm Frank Aiken. I am your host. Never good when you almost screw up your last name. Hey, so we're back to this with Harvard. So the idea is that it's free speech, right? That's what they're trying to suggest. But that falls on deaf ears when you know that Harvard has an abysmal free speech history. And as I mentioned, Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, did a survey with 55,000 students assessing openness, tolerance, self-expression, administrative support for free speech, and campus speech policies. Where did Harvard rank? Where was their final score, I should say? Their final score was 0. And you say, that's horrible. Actually, in all truthfulness, it was less than 0, because FIRE had to round up for minus 10.69 because of how their system works. That's true. Harvard pays lip service to free expression, but its record says otherwise. There have been 9 reported attempts in the last 5 years to punish students, student groups, scholars, and speakers for speech protected under First Amendment standards. 7 resulted in sanctions. While this may seem small, it's not. One sanction can potentially cause hundreds to self-censor out of fear. And I've always said on this program, I think that's one of the goals. They send out the warning, then people start self-censoring, and then they can say, we're not censoring, because they know that they've made other students. Think about it. If you're a student, you're a young person, you're in college, you want to be liked. You want to get good grades, most likely. You don't want to be a social pariah, ostracized. So you don't speak your mind about maybe your conservative values. And heaven forbid you go to your professor and try to put in a report about something conservative. There goes that grade point average. Now, students who self-report, listen to this, students who report self-censoring fairly often or very often have increased from 16% back in 2021 to 24%. So fairly often or very often they are self-censoring because they don't want to be out of what is considered the norm. And think about what has become the norm on college campuses. If Harvard and President Gay wish to live up to their motto of veritas, meaning truth, they must recommit to the fundamental principles of free expression that makes the search for truth possible. And to this point, again, this is from the New York Post, to their point, and I mentioned it yesterday on the program, it's just hard to, after that hearing, take them seriously when they're suggesting it's all about free speech. When we've seen with our own eyes what has been done to conservative speakers, conservative students, conservative faculty members, so to then get on their high horse in some way or start pretending at least that they're champions of free speech is pretty disingenuous and obviously very hard to believe. Now, I wanted to mention some other things. I want to get away from that. And by the way, you can comment at any point. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. Oh, let me promote something real quick. Tomorrow on the program, this has been a long time coming, Sheriff Jim Allard will be joining us tomorrow morning. I know I had meant to have him on because there's been some news breaking about what's going on with Steuben County and the legislature, but because of the new technical equipment, which I think if you look today, it's going really smooth. It was all worth it in the long run, but I said to the sheriff that his first guest I wanted to have on now that we're up and running. So he's going to be joining us tomorrow. Make sure that you tune in for that. Also, I want to say, as you see that we're getting ready for our telethon and just being in the holiday spirit, I know the background here, I knew I was going to do wrong, looks almost like it's green screened, but it's not. That's all real. That bow, it's just the way the shadows hit. But yeah, we have a Christmas tree up. I've got my stocking hung. We got an amazing Christmas tree from our friends at Armed Women America of Steuben County. I'll tell you more about that. We're going to have a special guest next week on that, and I'll show you the tree then, but it is in the background. Got a little Santa Claus. And anyway, join us on Friday to get in the holiday spirit starting at 6 a.m. Okay, No, got to take a break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox, broadcasting live and smoothly from the Hesselson studio on Marcus Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. One comment on what we were discussing, then I have one other quick thing on college campuses. This from a viewer. College has been the nursery for the Democratic Party. Change begins on campus. They are the future of things, young people. I believe the children are the future, as the song goes. For actual change, it needs to start there. And that's why I think these college professors, oh, thank you for the virtual wave, by the way. They've been smart in this. And that's why, and they really have, pushing their agenda. Not when I say smart, in a nefarious way, but pushing their agenda. And that's why you see this anger at being called out and being held accountable by their donors. The donors, their alum, they should just be giving them money and no questions asked. I mean, that's really the bubble that they live in on college campuses. But Cornell and Syracuse University have weighed in on students calling for the genocide of Jews. Cornell University president Martha Pollack said the university condemns calls for genocide of any people. Now, we know there's been some major issues at Cornell showing anti-Semitism on their campus. But Martha Pollack said an explicit call for genocide, to kill all members of a group of people, would be in a violation of our policies. That seems so mundane how she writes that. I mean, I can't even believe. Can you imagine that's how bad college campuses are, that you actually have to release that statement? That you actually have a situation where someone is saying, hey, could you comment about students calling for the genocide of a certain group? Just so we know where you stand, because we're not positive where you would stand. That is how bad colleges have become. My goodness, no wonder so many people are deciding to go into other fields and staying away from college. I mean, what, you get $150,000 in debt? Probably more than that. To leave with, whatever, basket weaving major, some studies major, we talk about that all the time, where you won't get a job and at the whole time being indoctrinated. But I'll continue. I'm sorry. I'm going on tangents this morning. I would remind you, a Cornell student was arrested in late October for allegedly making violent and anti-Semitic threats against the university's Jewish community. We brought it up quite a bit. And just because they're not that far off, Syracuse University Chancellor Kent Savard said advocating for genocide of Jews violates the university's code of conduct. He said they should expect more of the members of the campus community, regardless of what the First Amendment might permit for hateful speech and conduct. Quote, we should expect that our community members will refuse to advocate for the death of a group of people based on their identity. Yes, we should expect that. But we are at a time in society where you actually are not sure what the answer, especially after that congressional hearing, what the answer will be from these college presidents. It is unbelievable. By the way, this is also maybe a little concerning. Martha Pollack from Cornell, her statement, well, I can read the whole statement. It won't even take that much time. Over the past few days, a number of universities, including Cornell, have been asked by members of Congress to make clear their policies around genocide. Genocide is abhorrent, and Cornell condemns calls for the genocide of any people. An explicit call for genocide to kill all members of a group of people would be a violation of our policies, not referencing exactly the calls for genocide on Jews, but saying all groups, kind of another way they twist themselves up in the pretzels. I will give Chancellor Kent Savard from Syracuse a little more credit. His is that was as long as the Cornell statement was. This is about a page and a half. I'm not going to go through all of it, but he starts by saying, would advocating for the genocide of Jews violate Syracuse University's codes of conduct? And in bold, the answer is yes. He doesn't beat around the bush. And I also like the fact that he mentions what the specific issue has been. So the Cornell one maybe raises some red flags there about the lack of intensity and the length of the statement. All right, let's take another short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Please stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. Wow, we got to move fast. We got a lot to cover. Will Biden ever ask Americans whether they want sky-high levels of immigration, asks Rich Lowry. Do you remember the big national debate on whether the United States would adopt a policy to make the foreign share of the population the highest it's ever been? Neither do I, for the simple reason, of course, that there wasn't one. That doesn't mean the policy wasn't adopted through the Biden administration's imposition of a de facto open border for a large swath of asylum seekers. According to census data, and a study done by the Center for Immigration Studies has found that a 4.5 million net increase in immigrants since President Biden took office, and that has boosted the share of foreign-born to 15%, the highest ever recorded. So even more when you've seen the old black and white photos and videos of, Ellis Island, we long surpassed that. One reason there's so little discussion of the underlying issue is that many people simply don't know the historic numbers involved. In short, there's been no debate on 15%, which is where we're at, and one, shamefully, doesn't seem in the offing to come soon. I'm not going to talk much about this. Liz Cheney was on MSNBC, seems fitting. Maybe she'll get a job there in the future. It's nice to have her go to places where they hate her. I just don't understand that with the Republicans. I'll never understand that. The way they treated her father, the way they treated her until she started turning on Trump. She says, and if there's anybody that should know, she says that it's pathetic that Kevin McCarthy would be willing to serve in the second Trump administration. I can't explain it, she said. It's pathetic. There's sort of an element of it doesn't really matter what Donald Trump has done to the country, what Donald Trump has done to Congress. Donald Trump has done to Kevin McCarthy. And of course, it's on Jen Psaki's show, so she not interrupts, but goes, to him. Cheney said, yeah, it's kind of, going back for more. And I think it's sad, but I also think history's going to show that Kevin's unwillingness to do the right thing, and sort of each time that decision came, did real damage. Man, that sentence is kind of awkward. Sounds kind of, and I'm not being hypercritical here. That was a weird sentence. Let's take our last break, then we're going to wrap things up. We got a couple New York State issues, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. A beautiful day on Market Street here in Corning, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. This is Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and you're watching Big Fox. A couple quick things to breeze through. According to the Washington Post, China's cyber army is invading critical U.S. services, to a topic that we've discussed a lot on this program, and the real serious threat of China that unfortunately Washington does not seem to be taken seriously. The Chinese military is ramping up its ability to disrupt key American infrastructure, including power and water utilities, as well as communications and transportation systems, according to U.S. officials and industry security officials. Hackers affiliated with China's People's Liberation Army have burrowed into the computer systems of about 24 critical entities over the past year. The intrusions are part of a broader effort to develop ways to sow panic and chaos or snarl logistics in the event of a U.S.-China conflict in the Pacific. Something not to take lightly, folks. Something we can't hide our head in the sand. Quick New York issue before we go. New York's, I think I brought this up on the program not that long ago, it seems like, but I could be wrong. I wanted to put the article up, but of course I'm not prepared for that. New York's new automated speeding radars have issued over 130,000 tickets thus far. The new program was launched on Monday, April 17th. So since April 17th. On Thursday, Hochul announced that the cameras have issued 133,640 tickets through November 22nd, with 95,861 issued in work zones controlled by the New York State Department of Transportation. Now, we did okay around here. I guess we're considered, well, there's Binghamton and the Southern Tier. They got 1,200 tickets. That's quite a bit. Hornell and the Western Southern Tier, 211. Rochester, Finger Lakes, 32,578. That does it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, tomorrow on the program, we'll be talking with Sheriff Jim Allard. Really looking forward to that. That'll be tomorrow on the show. Friday, the big holiday special for the Salvation Army of Corning, starting at 6 a.m. So please set your alarm, and we'll be back tomorrow morning, starting at 7, with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, have a great day, everyone.